The wind wasn't just a sound up here, it was a physical force, a constant push against my body, a low hum that vibrated through the very core of the mountains. I was a week into my expedition, nestled in the remote peaks of the Himalayas, chasing the ghost. The ghost, as we wildlife photographers call them, is the elusive snow leopard. I'd spent 10 years of my life trying to get a decent, respectful shot of one. Not a staged picture, not a zoo animal, but a wild, free spirit in its natural habitat. It was a pilgrimage, a calling, not just a job. My camp was a small, well-worn tent, pitched precariously on a ledge, a 3-day hike from the nearest village. The only sounds were the wind, the occasional call of a high-altitude bird, and the click of my camera shutter. The season was early summer, a brief window of warmth before the monsoon rains. The snow was retreating, revealing treacherous rock faces and hidden crevasses. It was in one of these hidden places, on the third day of a long, fruitless trek, that my world turned upside down. I was making my way back to camp, tired and frustrated, when I saw it. A shadow moved on the ridge above me, not a bird or a goat, but something bigger. I raised my lens, the heavy camera a familiar weight in my hands, and focused. It was her, a magnificent snow leopard, her thick, smoky coat blending perfectly with the gray rock. But something was wrong. She wasn't stalking prey. She was limping, her right front paw held awkwardly off the ground. She was pacing back and forth along the edge of a deep, narrow gorge, a look of pure desperation in her amber eyes. I froze. Every instinct told me to be still, to not make a sound, to respect the distance. These animals are a blend of power and grace, a wild, untamed force. Approaching a wounded one, especially one that might be defending a den, was a recipe for disaster. But as I watched, she did something that shattered every rule I knew. She looked directly at me, not with aggression, not with fear, but with a gaze that was so raw, so filled with pleading, that it went straight to my soul. She let out a low, guttural cry, more a sob than a snarl, then glanced back into the gorge. She did it again, looking at me, then at the abyss, as if begging me to understand. I took a shaky step forward, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My professional ethics screamed at me to stay back, to observe, not to interfere. But my humanity, the very core of who I was pulling me forward. The look in her eyes wasn't just pleading, it was a call for help. Slowly, carefully, I moved closer, my boots crunching on the loose shale. I kept my hands visible, making no sudden movements. The snow leopard didn't move. She just watched me, her tail flicking with a nervous energy. The closer I got, the more I could see the true extent of her injury. A deep gash on her paw was weeping blood, and it looked infected. She was in pain, and she was terrified. When I was about 20 feet away, she let out another pitiful cry, then turned and limped a few steps along the gorge's edge. She stopped, looking back at me, then down. She was leading me. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. I knew this was crazy. I knew this was a line I should never cross. But I also knew I couldn't walk away. I followed her, my camera hanging uselessly from my neck. We walked for what felt like an eternity, the wind howling around us, until she stopped at a particularly treacherous, sheer drop. The gorge here was a jagged scar in the earth, and the sound of a small, whimpering cry was carried on the wind from below. She looked at me, then down, then back at me. I peered over the edge, my blood running cold. Below, on a narrow, crumbling ledge barely a foot wide, were 3 small, fluffy cubs. Their eyes were wide with terror, their tiny bodies shivering. They were trapped, a terrifying drop on either side, a sheer rock face above them, and no way down. Their mother's path was blocked by a recent landslide, a wall of loose rock that had been too unstable for her to navigate with her injury. She had tried. That much was clear from the fresh claw marks, but she couldn't reach them. They had likely wandered off and gotten themselves into this impossible situation. Their mother was helpless, and they were just a few feet away from falling to their deaths. This wasn't a story for a magazine. This was a desperate plea from one living creature to another. I couldn't just take pictures. I had to do something. The moment I looked into those tiny, terrified eyes, the decision was made for me. I pulled out my satellite phone, my hands shaking as I punched in the numbers. I needed help. Real help. I called my friend Jack, a seasoned mountaineer and a search and rescue veteran who ran a small outpost a day's hike from here. He was the only person I knew who could even contemplate a rescue like this. "Jack, It's me, Liam. I said into the phone, my voice barely audible over the wind. I'm at the Zanskar Gorge, about 5 miles north of my camp. I have a situation. A snow leopard and her cubs. They're trapped. I need you to come. Now, bring all your gear. Ropes, harnesses, everything. Jack's voice crackled on the other end. A leopard? Liam, are you crazy? You know the rules. We don't interfere. Forget the rules, Jack, I said, my voice rising. I'm looking at a mother who is literally begging me for help. And I'm looking at 3 cubs who are going to die if we don't do something. I'm not asking you to break the rules. I'm telling you there's a life to save. Several lives. There was a long pause, filled with static and the sound of the wind. Then, I heard him sigh. All right, Liam. I'm on my way. But I'm also calling Emily. We're going to need a vet. I hung up, a strange sense of relief washing over me. I wasn't alone anymore. Now, the longest wait of my life began. I stayed by the gorge, keeping a respectful distance from the mother leopard, but close enough to let her know I was still there. She never left. She paced. She cried. She watched me with an intensity that was both heart-wrenching and full of a fragile hope. I could feel the trust that was building between us, an unspoken pact forged in the face of impossible odds. The sun began to dip below the jagged peaks, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. The cold began to set in, a brutal, unforgiving cold that seeped into my bones. I knew the cubs wouldn't last the night exposed like that. My heart ached for them. I tried to think of a way to warm them, to reach them, but there was nothing. The rock was too unstable. All I could do was wait. About 6 hours later, in the dead of night, I saw the bobbing lights of headlamps in the distance. It was Jack and Emily. Jack, a man in his late 40s with a face like a topographical map of the Himalayas, was a force of nature. Emily, a brilliant young vet from the States who specialized in large felines, was all business. Her presence was a lifeline. Liam, what the hell have you gotten us into? Jack said, his voice a low growl as he surveyed the scene. That's a full-grown female, and she's not happy. She's not angry, Jack, I said, pointing to her. She's scared. And look at her paw. Emily, without a word, approached the leopard slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. She had a bag of tranquilizer darts and a small first aid kit. The leopard watched her, a low rumble in her throat, but she didn't bolt. She seemed to understand that these people weren't here to hurt her. She was making a leap of faith, a desperate gamble that we were her only hope. After a tense few minutes, Emily managed to get a small, low-dose tranquilizer into her. The leopard, a bit dazed, eventually lay down, her head resting on her paws, but her eyes never left the gorge. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Emily quickly worked on her paw, cleaning the wound and wrapping it. She gave her an antibiotic and some painkillers. She'll be okay, Emily whispered, more to herself than to us. But we need to get the cubs now. She won't rest until they're safe. Jack, ever the professional, started setting up the ropes. He carefully anchored a line to a huge boulder, checking and rechecking every knot. The wind was relentless, making the task even more difficult. He looked down into the blackness of the gorge, and I could see the hesitation in his eyes. It's a long way down, Liam, he said, his voice grave. And that ledge, it looks like it could go at any moment. I know, I said, but we have to try. I volunteered to go down first. My camera was useless now, but I had a good head for heights and was a decent climber. Jack, being the professional, insisted he would do the main descent. I would be his spotter, a second set of eyes, a second anchor. Okay, listen up, Jack said, his tone all business. This is a one-shot deal. We don't have time to mess around. I'm going to rappel down to the ledge. Liam, you're on the safety line. Emily, you're with the mother, keeping her calm. Got it. We all nodded. The air was thick with tension, a palpable fear that something would go wrong. I felt a surge of adrenaline, my senses heightened. I could hear every scrape of rock, every gust of wind, every tiny whimper from the cubs below. Jack started his descent, a slow, methodical journey into the darkness. The rope creaked under his weight, the sound amplified by the silence of the night. My job was to watch the rope, to make sure there was no snag, no fraying. The mother leopard, groggy but alert, watched him go, her ears twitching with every movement. He disappeared from view, and the only sign of him was the occasional tug on the rope. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I was counting them in my head, my mind racing with 100 different scenarios. What if the ledge crumbles? What if the cubs panic? What if the mother wakes up fully and attacks him? Suddenly, I heard a shout from below. "Liam, get ready. One cub coming up." I pulled on the rope, my muscles straining. It was heavy, and I knew Jack was carrying the cub. I could feel the precious weight of the small, terrified creature on the other end. Inch by agonizing inch, I pulled. Emily was by my side, ready with a blanket and a makeshift carrier. When the first cub appeared over the edge, it was a sight that will be forever etched in my memory. A tiny, shivering ball of fluff, its eyes wide with fear, its tiny claws desperately clinging to Jack's jacket. We quickly wrapped it in the blanket and put it in the carrier, away from the mother. The mother, despite her grogginess, lifted her head and let out a soft, chuffing sound, a sound of relief and longing. She knew we had her baby. We repeated the process 2 more times. The third cub, however, was a different story. Just as Jack was securing it, I saw it. A huge, jagged rock, dislodged by the movement, was tumbling down the sheer face of the gorge, heading straight for the ledge. "Jack, rock!" I screamed, my voice raw. He had no time to react. The rock hit the ledge with a sickening crunch. I saw the cub flinch, and the ledge, the only thing holding them up, began to crack. A fissure snaked its way through the rock, and a huge chunk broke away, disappearing into the darkness with a loud, echoing rumble. Jack and the cub were now hanging by the rope alone, swaying precariously. I gripped the rope, my knuckles white, my whole body trembling. This was it. This was the moment I had feared. The rope strained, the knot on the boulder held, but I wasn't sure for how long. I could hear Jack's labored breathing on the other end, the frantic cry of the cub. "Liam, hold on," he yelled. "I'm coming up. I'm coming up." He was climbing the rope with one hand, the other holding the cub to his chest. It was an incredible feat of strength and will, but he was losing his grip, his tired muscles screaming in protest. I could see him, a dark shape against the night sky, slowly, agonizingly, pulling himself upwards. Every second was an eternity. I looked at the mother leopard. She was awake now, fully alert, her eyes fixed on the rope, on her last cub. She let out a soft cry, a sound of pure terror. She knew. She understood the danger. And in that moment, our fates, human and animal, were completely intertwined. We were all fighting for the same thing, to bring that last, precious life back to safety. I pulled on the rope with all my might, my feet planted firmly on the ground. I felt a surge of energy, a desperate need to help my friend, to save that cub. I wasn't just pulling a rope anymore. I was pulling a life that had trusted us, a life that had been placed in our hands. And I wouldn't let it go. The sun was a sliver of light on the horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows across the mountains, when Jack finally pulled himself over the edge. He was exhausted, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, but in his arms, safe and sound, was the last cub. I rushed over, helping him to his feet, a wave of relief so powerful it almost knocked me over. Emily was already there, taking the cub from him, checking it for injuries. The little one was scared but unharmed. The mother leopard, now fully awake and watching us from a safe distance, let out a low, purring chuff. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated happiness. She looked at her cubs, now all huddled together in their temporary carrier, then at us. Her gaze was soft, filled with a gratitude that transcended language. We spent the rest of the day and the next few days in a makeshift camp, taking care of the leopard family. Emily, with her expertise, confirmed the mother's paw was not broken, just a deep cut that required cleaning and rest. We built a small enclosure for them, a sort of quarantine area where we could provide food and water and monitor their health without causing them too much stress. The days passed in a strange, beautiful rhythm. We would sit and watch them, from a distance, of course. The mother would lick her cubs, groom them, and play with them. They were getting stronger, their fears slowly replaced by a playful curiosity. The trust she had placed in us never wavered. She would eat the food we left for her, a sure sign that she felt safe in our presence. She wasn't a wild animal to me anymore. She was a mother, a survivor, a testament to the incredible strength of a parent's love. I took pictures, of course, but not for my project. These were for me, a personal record of an extraordinary event. I captured the quiet moments, the cubs sleeping in a tangled pile, The mother's watchful gaze, the way she would nudge them with her nose, a silent promise of protection. I felt a profound shift within me. I had always seen my role as an observer, a documentarian. Now, I knew it was more. It was about connection. It was about responsibility. About a week later, Emily said the mother was healed enough. The cubs were strong and healthy. It was time. We had to let them go. We broke down the enclosure, a sense of bittersweet sadness hanging in the air. We were all going to miss them. As we watched from a ridge, the snow leopard, with her 3 cubs trailing behind her, started her journey back into the wild. She looked back once, her eyes meeting mine, and I felt a pang in my chest. It was a goodbye, a silent thank you, a confirmation of a bond that had been forged in the crucible of fear and desperation. I stayed in the mountains for another month, not just to photograph, but to watch. I saw her a few times from afar, her cubs growing bigger and stronger. They were thriving. They were alive. And I knew, in that moment, that I had done the right thing. My life, my work, had a new purpose. It wasn't just about capturing beauty. It was about protecting it. It was about listening to the quiet pleas of a mother and answering her call. It was a story I would never be able to tell with just a picture, but one I would carry in my heart forever. A month passed, and my life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. I went back to my home in Wyoming, a small cabin surrounded by the Grand Tetons, trading the silent giants of the Himalayas for my own backyard mountains. The memory of the snow leopard and her cubs was a constant presence, a quiet hum beneath the surface of my everyday life. My photographs, the ones I had taken for myself, were developed and hung on my wall. They weren't just images, they were artifacts of a profound transformation. The world, however, continued to move. My friends, Jack and Emily, were back to their own lives. Jack was busy with other search and rescue missions, and Emily was back at her veterinary clinic. We talked on the phone a few times, sharing a connection that went beyond friendship, a shared secret that had bound us together. We all knew what we had done, and we all knew it had changed us. About 2 months after I returned, an email landed in my inbox. It was from a wildlife conservation organization. They had heard about my expedition and were interested in seeing my work. This was the moment I had been working towards for years. The big break. The chance to showcase my photographs to a wider audience, to tell the story of these magnificent creatures. But now, it all felt different. The old me would have been ecstatic. The new me felt a sense of trepidation. I opened the email and responded. I didn't send them my usual portfolio. I sent them the photos I had taken of the mother leopard and her cubs, the ones I had considered to be for my eyes only. I wrote a short, honest cover letter, explaining what had happened, what I had witnessed. I didn't try to make it dramatic or sensational. I just told them the truth. I told them about the mother's eyes, about the cub's terror, about the impossible rescue. I told them about the trust that had formed between us. I told them this wasn't just a story about a wild animal. It was a story about humanity. A few days later, my phone rang. It was the director of the organization, a woman named Sarah Jenkins. Her voice was calm, but full of an undeniable energy. "Liam," she said, "I've been looking at your photographs, and I've been reading your account. It's extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it." I found myself holding my breath. I wasn't sure what to expect. A lecture about interfering with wildlife? A dismissal of my story as impossible? "This isn't a story about a photographer," she continued. "It's a story about a human being. It's a story that needs to be told." She offered me a job, not just as a photographer, but as an ambassador. To travel, to speak, to share my story. To use my skills not just to document, but to inspire. To tell people that these animals are not just subjects for our cameras. They are our neighbors. They are a part of our world, and we have a responsibility to protect them. I accepted without hesitation. This was the purpose I had been searching for, the one that had been revealed to me on a cold, desolate mountain ridge. Over the next 6 months, my life became a whirlwind of travel and talks. I was on a small stage in Denver, speaking to a group of college students. I was in a grand hall in New York, presenting to philanthropists and donors. I showed them my photos, the ones of the mother with her cubs, and I told them the story. I told them about the moment I first saw her, about the look in her eyes, about the rescue, about the goodbye. One day, after a particularly emotional talk, a young woman came up to me. She was a student, a biology major. She told me she had been feeling disillusioned with her studies, feeling like her work was just a small drop in a massive, uncaring ocean. "But your story," she said, her eyes welling up with tears, "it changed something in me. It made me realize that every single life matters. That every single act of kindness, no matter how small, can make a difference. It's not about saving the whole world. It's about saving one corner of it, one life at a time." I realized then that my story wasn't just my story anymore. It was theirs. It was a story of hope, a story of connection. About a year after the rescue, I received another email from Sarah. She had just returned from an expedition to the same region where my story had taken place. They had a team on the ground, a small group of researchers monitoring the local snow leopard population. They had a surprise for me. The email contained a photograph, a stunning, high-quality image of a snow leopard resting peacefully on a sun-drenched rock. And next to her, no longer small and vulnerable, were 3 young, healthy snow leopards, almost a year and a half old. Their markings were distinct, and I recognized them immediately. It was her, the mother, the cubs. I zoomed in on the picture. I saw the mother's eyes. I saw the strength, the peace, the resilience. She was home. She was thriving. Her trust in me had not been misplaced. The leap of faith she had taken had been rewarded. She had risked everything for her children, and her courage had saved them all. I looked at my own life, at the path I had taken since that day, the choices I had made. I had given up a life of quiet observation for one of public advocacy. I was still a photographer, but my lens was now focused on something more than just a beautiful image. It was focused on the story behind the image. It was focused on the connection between all living things. My journey had started with a single, desperate cry on a cold mountain ridge. It had ended with the quiet, triumphant purr of a mother and her cubs, a sound I could almost hear, even from thousands of miles away. The ghost of the mountains was no longer a ghost. She was a symbol of life, of hope, and of the incredible power of empathy. And I was no longer just a photographer. I was a part of her story. I was a part of their story. And that, I knew, was a far more beautiful thing than any photograph could ever be.